And we're live. Welcome to our show, Get Me Someone Who Can Sell. Today, I'm your host, Olga Pishnyanka. I always forget to say who I am. But I'm your host, Olga Pishnyanka from Revenue Hire. And today I've got an awesome treat for you guys. I've got Rocky here with me. And the way I met Rocky is I was talking to one of somebody, I don't remember who I was talking to, and I always ask, who is the really great salesperson you know? And they were just going crazy about you, and I was like, well, I have to meet you. And then once we got introduced, we realized that we might be in similar fields, but I am in the camp where there's abundance for everybody, and so I don't, you know, competition is great, but it's also there's plenty for everybody. So I was like, I need to have you on the show because clearly you've done amazing things in your life. You've had 3 exits, you've worked with thousands of companies, you've got a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm all about sharing wisdom, and so other people can learn from your experience. Hopefully somebody is not going to repeat the same mistakes that they shouldn't. So we'll get in the nitty gritty of all of that. Our show is really for the CEOs and sales leaders that are growing their companies and they're scaling, and so we're building our time together for that. But I also know a lot of salespeople are watching our show just to, get coached and get better in whatever craft that they're in. So, Rocky, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. And do you want to get into it?
Thank you, Olga. I appreciate the invitation. And we were right when we met. It's almost like we couldn't stop talking.
Yeah.
So I've really been looking forward to spending some time with you. And yeah, we are kind of, we provide some of the same services, but you do it your way, I do it mine, and there's no right or wrong way. It's what's right for the client. And you're right. We have to have the mindset of abundance.
Right.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of me in terms of just experience, and I love learning from those that have been ahead.
I've just failed at it more.
We can say it that way. Okay, so the first question I like to ask to everybody when we first start is, what interested you about sales, and how did you know that you would be any good at it?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll try not to be too long winded, but I was 22 years old. I was working hard. I was working at UPS from 3 in the morning to 9 in the morning, going to college some days, working in the afternoons and evenings, selling life insurance, annuities, retirement stuff. And on the weekends, I was doing landscaping. And I was having lots of fun like most 22-year-olds. And after about 18 months of that, I was just burned out. So I was looking for something different. I picked up the paper. There was an ad that said management potential $1,200 a month. Now, this was 1985, so that was decent money. And I was like, hey, I got to see. So I called them. They invited me. I went down for the interview, and it was a first group interview, and I had no idea what it was. I walked in, it was like 40 people in the room. I'm like, what is going on here? So I take a seat in the front row, and somebody comes in and they give us a speech about success, and then they make us watch a video. Then somebody else comes in, and it just kind of goes on till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm like, what is going on here?
Huh.
Well, all this time over in the far corner of the room was a conference table with a white sheet on top of it. And you could see stuff up underneath it, but didn't know what it was. And so the trainer Calvin walked over and ripped the sheet off about 3 o'clock, and it was a parted out Kirby vacuum cleaner. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I laughed out loud. I'm like, he goes, what are you laughing at? I'm like, well, you've had me here all day for a vacuum cleaner? Really? And he did a really interesting thing. Now I know what he did, but at the time I had no idea. But he goes, yeah, you probably couldn't sell any of these anyway. And I'm like, really? I bet you I could sell more than anybody in the room. He goes, well, prove it. So that weekend, I went out and sold 6 of them. I think I made about $4,000 or $5,000. And back then, that was a lot of money. And of course, they do that to get you in. And I was there for 6 months, and that was some of the best sales experience I ever had. Selling door to door, cold knocking. I got arrested for soliciting. I was selling like 1 out of 3 every time I sold it. Back then I was probably making $1,000 a week selling vacuum cleaners. And then after 6 months, I sold one to an older lady with 13 kids and no carpet one evening. And I couldn't sleep. And I was like, I can't do this. This is wrong. I mean, I believe I have talent, but I'm not using it the right way. And so I quit the next morning and drove to Dallas, got an apartment, started kind of a new career. I couldn't do it.
So
So
sounds like you
that's
got
really how I got into professional sales.
right. You got hooked on sales, and then what was next for you? How did you kind of what happened?
Yeah. So long story short, I went to work with a landscape company. It was very small. It was about 3 trucks, the owner and a couple of guys and a small crew. And he had won a bid for a pretty large condominium association, about a 300-acre property, and really needed somebody on that side of town to open a new branch and run the crews and all that. So I talked my way into that job. And when I got the job, I said, well, what about sales and commission? He goes, sales and commission. I'm like, yeah, what do I get if I sell something? And he says, well, you do everything I need you to do, and then you can go sell. I'm like, great. Well, I was done with everything he needed and wanted by 2 o'clock. So I'd go back to the office, pat down, put on a clean shirt, and go out selling. And the first year, I sold over $1 million worth of landscaping services. And this is commercial apartments and buildings and strip malls and stuff like that. And we went from 11 employees to 125 employees in 3 years. And that's really kind of where I
Hold on,
learned the ceiling
11
of complexity.
to 125
Yeah, in 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Impressive. Just because the guy got lucky to have you in there doing sales.
Yeah. And like a lot of growing young professionals, the mistake I made was thinking it was my business. And so after a
Mm.
while, we kind of ran into some conflict, and then I got married and, didn't want to stay in Dallas. So, but yeah, it was interesting. That's kind of where I really first learned about the ceiling of complexity. When you think about a business that's, growing, there are some trigger points that you have to figure out. Where are those trigger points to get you to the next level? So, example, we could go out and sell $300,000 worth of services, and that would keep a crew of 6 guys busy, and it would justify the investment in the trucks and the equipment and trailers.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just go hire a bunch of people and not have anything for them to do, and you can't go buy all the equipment and not let it sit. So what we learned was that we would stretch the crews, from 6 guys to 7 guys to 8 guys. And so from 300,000 to about 500,000, you could stretch the crews, but you couldn't do it that long. But as soon as you hit 600,000, you buy a new vehicle, trailer, trucks, all that, split the crews. Now you got 3 on each crew, and you grow that to that next 600. And then you split them again, and then you split them again. And so it just really, was awesome that the guy I was working with, smart guy and all that. He had the banking connections, had some money, and he was able to invest, and we were able to support it with, potential future cash flow. And so then I hired a couple of sales guys, and we really started growing faster. And I was teaching them, and I knew I was moving to New York, and I was a little concerned, wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I took a Dale Carnegie class.
Uh-huh.
And it changed my life. It really did. It made a
Wait,
huge
hold on. So you just this is very interesting, right? Because you're demonstrating something. What I always tell our clients is that really great salespeople, they're always learning. They're always trying to work on their craft and they're improving and they're seeking it out. So did the Dale Carnegie class find you? Or did somebody say you really suck at this? You got to go learn this. Like, how did that happen?
Well, my dad had always talked about it, and I just thought that coming into a new environment, a different world, so to say, I had a little doubt. I wasn't sure, and I'd always heard about that program, so I went and talked to them and signed up, and I won every single award every single night and for the whole program. And I wasn't really trying. I mean, it was just kind of like natural. And I was like,
You're just built that way.
I was like, wait a minute. You can actually make money and help people and stand up in front of the room and talk to people. I mean, that was just so easy.
So you took that course. Did you become one of their consultants teaching that?
Yeah. So when we moved to New York, I went to work for them. And another group interview, And then we got called back, and we had to stand up in front of the camera and tell the center manager why we were the ones that should get the job. So somehow or another, I got the job. First month was no sales. Second month was no sales. Third month was no sales. I was making 120 to 150 cold calls a day. I was going through all of their courses as well. And month four, I was number 10 in the country. And I stayed number 10 in the country for the next 18 months. And from there, I capped out. Just wasn't a lot of ability to make more money. So I left and got involved with franchise. Wound up with that for about 7 years. Left the franchise world, and I couldn't be in the training business. And we were already doing some work with our clients, helping them hire salespeople. Salespeople come and go, and what is it, 18 million salespeople in the country, and they change jobs every 18 months. So there's a constant pool of salespeople out there. It's just a matter of how you find them and attract them to you. But when I left, I started a sales recruiting business called Sales Kingdom. We nationalized it, we franchised, and then I sold it a few years later. And then, just kind of worked back into what today we call a sales development expert.
That's awesome. Because right now, you, if I understand this correctly, you help them fish. So the companies, you help them learn how to hire the right salespeople. Then they hire their people. You help them how to do that, and then you train them and make sure that they're growing and delivering the results that the company wants them to have.
Yeah, so that's part of what we do. And I think, building a world-class sales team, obviously hiring the right people is a key component. And there's a lot of, stuff that you and I can probably share some secrets about that we do. But it's also about transforming from whatever culture they have to a sales culture. And that means that every decision that's made has to have sales at the center point and how it's going to affect sales, not how it's going to affect engineering or shipping or logistics or, accounting or something else. And so for businesses, between 5 and 10 million, it's really challenging to get everybody on the same page. But then when you get a little bit bigger, 10 to 15 million, you have more leaders. They've been there longer. They have more influence. And, no offense to anybody out there, but we kind of call some of those people the sales prevention department because, to build a true sales culture, everything has to be about sales. And that's got to be the first priority. And in most organizations, sales is the last thing that people think about.
Yep.
It's always about the product, or it's about, this or the other. And it's like, yeah, the customer's first and the client's first. But if you don't have sales and you don't have revenue coming in, you got nothing else to do. You got nothing else to talk about. So it's really, we help presidents and CEOs typically from 5 to 50, maybe $80 million. Certainly we've got global clients and smaller clients, but that's kind of the sweet spot because that's where they need us most. You get over 80 million and they've got HR, talent management, internal training departments. You get under that number and they just don't have enough and they're not ready yet to really grow. So that's kind of the marketplace. I mean, we've been doing this about 35 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. All right. So I've got lots of questions about all this. So let's talk about the sales organization versus non-sales organization. Yeah. Would you say that in order for a company to grow, they gotta prioritize becoming sales organization, or have you seen companies scale where that's not a priority? Like,
well, obviously there's a lot of companies out there that have grown that are not sales oriented. So it doesn't mean they can't grow and they can't, develop and they can't evolve and, become great companies. It's just, it takes longer to get there. It's like, if you have the better mousetrap, great. Just go back and look a couple of years ago in the economy. There was a lot of things that were going on and business was growing and people were spending money and, things have slowed down in the last 18 months to 2 years. They've been threatening a recession, soft landing. One article says this, the next one says the opposite, interest rates, inflation, all of that. So it's a little more difficult to sell today and to create value and to create urgency than it was,
Right.
years ago. So things have to get better on the sales side, and there has to be a focus there. And companies don't even realize that they evolve to where they're at. And, sometimes the prisoners are running the asylum.
Ooh, that's a good one. So what are the benefits of being a sales organization? Kind of what are the top three, you think?
I think you grow faster.
That's
You
a good
have
one.
you have more control of your revenue. You have less turnover. You have a stronger environment. Um, Other people in the organization have more to do, right? They want to work with the organization because it's a great organization. And part of being a great organization is continued growth.
And what happens in a company that when they're not prioritizing being a sales organization? Like what are some of the
Well, I think it's like if you're not growing, you're dying, right?
yeah.
And I think it's like the ceiling of complexity. When a business reaches a certain level, it's very difficult to get past that level without a huge influx of capital or an acquisition or something happening in the landscape of the marketplace. Maybe your biggest competitor, their building catches on fire and they decide not to come back in business. It's some crazy events. But getting through that is really about focusing on building a world-class sales organization and making sure everybody is hitting their potential, reaching their potential, and they've got a place to go at their next step, right? I mean, companies either outgrow the sales team or the salespeople outgrow the company.
Right.
And so the goal is to keep growth together and orchestrate where everybody grows together.
So what would you say when you're talking to the CEOs of these companies? How do you have like a little, I don't know, checklist or questions you ask to figure out if they are so sales organization or not? So for those people that are watching us right now who are running the companies, is there any like a quick little litmus test that they can ask themselves a
Well,
question?
just think about the last big decision you made. What was the center point of that decision? What were your considerations? Was it about technology? Was it about service? Was it about logistics? Was it about capital equipment? Or was it, how does this going to affect sales? And I don't mean creating new products for sales to sell. I mean, how's this decision going to impact the sales organization and what they do day to day, and how does that benefit sales and how does that benefit the company?
Oh, that's good. Because you're right. A lot of times sales is kind of the stepchild
Yeah.
of the company, right? It's like,
I was
oh,
going to say that, but I didn't want to use a derogatory term for anybody out there.
oh, I'm Russian. I'm sure I'll offend somebody. So,
You know, stepchild is not bad. I was one, and I love my stepchild.
I have a step. I call it a bonus child. I have one myself, but to me, it's kind of sometimes I feel that way when I talk to CEOs. Is like sales is almost like you go do
Yeah,
your
it's the second
job.
or third consideration, not the first.
Right, right.
Well,
Interesting.
they're salespeople. We'll just get them to sell it. Yeah, but that changes. It changes the dynamics of who they're selling to. It might change the sales cycle. It might change, the ability to ask about more money or less money, or more transactions or less transactions with higher uh, amounts, or volume. And salespeople, I love you guys. I'm a salesperson at heart. I think it's the greatest career anybody could ever choose. And salespeople are dysfunctional, and I can say that because I are one.
Yes,
But
but
we are.
all
Who else in their right mind would go to work and fail 70% of the time,
right,
other than weathermen,
right. Yeah,
right?
very true. No, that's interesting. So it sounds like one of the first things for CEOs, if they're not growing as fast as they want to grow, is one place for them to look and ask the question is, we a sales organization at our heart, and be
Yeah,
honest with yourself about it.
yeah, and I mean, there's so many variables. That's what makes sales difficult. There's no two situations alike, and you have to be able to, use all of the human behavior, psychology, communication, capabilities, understanding of people, and it's a difficult role, more difficult than any other role in any organization.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's the stepchild, which is an afterthought, not the forethought.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also, you know, salespeople get into habits. Sales managers, it's not their fault, but they don't really coach effectively. We ask companies all the time, how often are your sales managers coaching? And we ask managers that, and they go all the time. It's like, well, okay, let's change the question. How often do your coaching sessions end with an action plan and a lesson? And the answer is rarely, if at all. And so most managers have really never been taught how to coach effectively, how to recognize whether the salesperson's issues are based in their unconscious biases, which are kind of conceptual, or is it a technical issue that they just don't know what they don't know? And so coaching is probably one of the biggest responsibilities of sales management. And in the smaller organizations, those principal led organizations where they're the top salesperson, they got 3 to 5 salespeople, maybe 10, they don't spend enough time wearing that sales manager hat, and they can't transfer their success to the team, and they have intrinsic value that the team doesn't have. And they don't understand why their salespeople can't sell more.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And if you hire salespeople and you're growing or replacing, you want that next salesperson to raise the bar for everybody. We just had an organization we've been working with for a little bit. They brought somebody in that we helped them with, and they sold quadruple what the highest salesperson ever sold in their organization. So
Wow.
it kind of raised the bar and goes, oh, this is really possible. They didn't even realize that. And so part of the challenge I see is that whether it's a large company, mid-size, whatever, whoever's leading sales, obviously they've got some great experience. Maybe they've been in sales 10, 15, 25 years. But when they look at the experience with the number of salespeople and the number of organizations, that's sort of limited compared to what we can bring to the table. I mean, if you've worked with 1,000 salespeople, that's fantastic. You've got a lot of experience. What if you had somebody that worked with 1,000,000 salespeople, or had data on 1,000,000 salespeople, and had coached and developed thousands and thousands and thousands of teams? It brings a different perspective to the table.
I read this somewhere. I don't remember where I read this, but we right now accept this as norm with marketing, with HR, with a lot of functions in the company, with the outsourcing of that function in different ways is okay. But when it comes to sales, kind of what we talked about, you have all this wisdom where, like, let's say you've coached and worked with thousands and thousands of salespeople, but it's not very popular to outsource some of the sales functions to different pros because for whatever reasons we have to figure out all on our own. Like in marketing, you always have there's somebody who does your funnels, there's somebody who does your CRM. There's all these experts that the company hires because they are up to date on everything, right? And when it comes to sales, kind of what you're talking about, like, why is it not okay? And
And think about it. Let me just take what you're doing and put it in a different way. If you're a CEO of, let's just say, a $40 million business, I'll guarantee you that CEO has a go-to attorney for any kind of problems they have with the organization, whether it's labor or whether it's infringement rights.
And they're not going to be the same person sometimes. They can be different people.
So they have an attorney, and then they have an accountant, right? They have somebody that they go to. And those are two really important parts of the business too. But who's their salesperson? And they rely on the VPs, which I love VPs. And if you're out there, don't take this the wrong way, but most VPs don't want us playing in their sandbox because they don't want to be exposed for what they didn't do. But it's not about what they didn't do. It's what they didn't know to do, or did the organization give them the resources to do what was necessary?
Right. comes a bandwidth for
Yeah,
sure.
a VP of sales is typically for a mid-sized growing company is typical 10 years, 18 months. And that's not enough time to show
Ooh,
progress.
yeah.
So those PE firms that are out there, if any of you guys are there and you got, this is typically what we see is the VP's got 18 months to show good progress. If they don't, they're fired. They hire another one. Well, it's the same issue, but it's an underlying hidden issue that the PE firms and the leadership doesn't see. If you've got a 9-month sales cycle, you can't change anything for 9 months plus 90 to 120 days because you're not going to be able to impact what's in the funnel already or what salespeople are doing. It's going to take time to refocus the team, to get them doing some things that are going to be more productive and effective. It's going to take time to get the managers to coach effectively and hold people accountable and motivate. So there's 12 months. And if you've got, a 9, 6, 12-month sales cycle, you don't start seeing bottom line results until 18 to 24 months. And then if they get rid of the sales manager 18 months because they need to be worried about the next quarter instead of the next 2 years, then they bring somebody else in and they start over and they
Yeah.
think it's the VP. And then if the VPs, 2 of them have been gone through, then the president's fired and they start over with a new one. And they're just constantly trying to fix the problem, but they're chasing the bullseye around the target instead of doing the right thing, which is first, let's look at what you got. I mean, what are the strengths and skills and weaknesses and unconscious biases, system processes of the team? Who's growable? Who's got potential? Who doesn't? Are they in the right role? So there's a whole lot of questions that we want to get answered first. Then we can put together a plan and we'll tell you exactly what the ROI is and how long it's going to take to get there.
So this is an interesting question about the turn of the leadership, sales leadership, and can you give us an example maybe or two, where you come in, there's a churn, not once, not twice, right, but multiple times. There's clearly a problem. They're not growing. What is some of the diagnostics that you typically do or recommend doing, other than obviously bringing you guys on board? But is there anything that the questions that the CEOs or the team can start asking themselves in terms of improving their situation and avoid the further churn?
Yeah. Um, Thanks for asking. And I'm going to send you a gift card for asking that question because it's going to sound like a plug for
I
me
don't
and our company, but
know.
it's really the right thing to do. We need to know where you're at today. Where do you want to get to? Is that realistic? When do you want to get there? And what's it going to take to get there? And so, from that standpoint, we look at what are the company's strategies and how they go to market, what are their current systems and processes around sales, and then what is the ideal profile of your ideal salesperson for each role. And based on that, we marry that with our database, which is 2.5 million salespeople, 36,000 companies, the biggest sales database in the world, and we create a unique business model for that organization. From there, we have everyone on the team complete a questionnaire that's weighted based on that business model. Selling 18-month, $2 million enterprise software stuff is a lot different than selling, pay-per-click advertising. So the business model is married together and people are measured against that. And then we look at what are the skills, what are the strengths, what's the grit, what are the unconscious biases, what are the kind of missing gaps in the roles and the ability to execute. And so from there we can put together a plan with exactly who needs what, how long it's going to take. The company can do some of that, we can do some of that, we can teach the company how to do it. There's a lot of ways to figure that plan out or execute that plan. And then when they do it, we typically see 30 to 50% growth. And companies that are in the 40, 50, $80 million mark go, no way, you're not growing that much. But guess what?
They are.
You will.
Can
You
you
do. Yeah, and they do.
one of
Absolutely.
your favorite stories about that, like where you come in and kind of help them? I'm putting you on the spot, but can you think of a story?
Yeah, I'll tell you 2 quick ones. One was a supply company in the oil field business. They had just lost their largest account. It was about $5 million a year. They had to replace that $5 million in the next year. So that's a third of their business. So within 9 months after we did our analysis and put together the customized development plan, 9 months later they had replaced that, and by the end of the year they had grown. Another organization, more on the technical side, they were taking legacy software with large organizations, banks, insurance companies, financial organizations. It's old legacy software and bring it into today's time and setting them up for the next 3 to 5 years of ability to do what they needed to do with the big data. They had 24 program managers. These weren't salespeople. They had a lot of initials behind their names and were really very technical. So we did our analysis, realized that none of them are salespeople, and that's okay. We put together a 6-month program that was customized to these people that was really fundamental. It's like, this is a football, like Vince Lombardi started every football season, and taught them some basics. And then we took half of that team, 12 of them, spent another 6 months with them, and they were doing a lot more of the things we wanted to do. And then we spent 6 more months with 6 of those people and turned them into real killers. They went from 8 million a year to 24 million in 18 months, and
Wow.
then sold 2 years later for 54 million. So if you do the right things with the people, and when I say the right things, it's most people just don't know what they don't know. And even seasoned reps and people that have been doing this for 25 years, we make it more fun for them. We remind them of a lot of things they forgot, and we get them to think differently. So it's not about teaching them what to say. It's not about giving them scripts and all that. That doesn't work. It's about teaching them how to think, and how to think like a salesperson with business acumen, understanding the real problems and the consequences their clients and prospects are going to face if they don't buy from us now.
Right. And it
If
goes
you can't
back.
if you can't figure that out, you got nothing to sell.
Well, and what you just said is it's very interesting. Like the second example you gave us, where most of them were not sales, right?
Yeah.
Salespeople, and you go, "What? How do you have not salespeople in the sales department?" Well, believe it or not, it happens
Oh
more
yeah.
than
Well, they weren't salespeople. They were project managers. They were taking 1 or 2 of the company employees to the client, and they'd have a team at the client, and they might work together for 3 to 6
it's like
months.
having a soccer team full of basketball players. It's just you're
Yeah.
gonna have handballs all around.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna happen. And so I'll never forget my the first time I took OMG, I was 25 maybe. So I was really young, and I thought I was perfect and amazing.
Yeah.
And I still learned all the things and all the holes I had that I had to work on. And I still work on it.
Yeah.
But awareness, this is what I think what you said kind of comes back to. If a person has, whether or not they're salespeople, that's the first question. Can and will they sell?
And
And this,
sales is a learned skill. It's not something people are born with.
right. But most of the time, especially as you kind of stay in the career and you don't want people to know what you don't want them to know, like maybe you're embarrassed by that. Like my money mindset was terrible because I came from the Soviet Union. So I had to work on my money mindset, and I still do. And I think it'll be work forever. But I had no idea I had that problem.
Yeah.
Right. Or my emotional control needed work or whatever. And I was just like, no one ever sat me down before that and said, this is what you've got going for you, and this is what you got to work on. And
Yeah.
guess what? Things happen once I started improving
Right.
that.
And if you don't know what you don't know, you can't be held
Right.
accountable to it. So
Right.
that kind of brings us back to, how do you get to the next level with your organization and transforming your sales organization? It's like, well, you may or may not have the right people in the right roles.
Yep.
You have gotten to where you've gotten the way you've been doing it, but you can't get to 15 million from 8 million thinking and running your business the same way you run an $8 million business. If you want to get to the next level, you have to start thinking like you're at that next level, making decisions at that next level, and getting people to do what needs to be done at that level. Right. So it's almost like you just have to make the decision and then believe it and start doing it at that level, which, sometimes it means a change in some operational things. It means maybe expanding and getting some more warehouse space. It means, expanding your capabilities with labor and, materials and supplies and all those things. But it's really, to get to that next level, you have to believe it's possible. CEOs, presidents, VPs of sales, you have to be willing to be coached. Are you ready to be coached?
That's a big one.
And are you willing to hold yourself and people accountable? Right. And
Wow.
accountability doesn't have to be bad, but most people go, yeah, we got accountability, we got a CRM, we're measuring these things, but they're not measuring enough of the right things enough often or frequently enough. And for true accountability, there's got to be rewards and consequences. You can't just say, oh, we're going to hold people accountable and put in all these, accountability factors, which, if there's not a consequence and a reward, there's no accountability.
Right. So you're kind of leading me to my next question, which is, there's different frameworks, right, in terms of growth stages. Yeah. Growth of stages of growth, whatever the word
Yeah.
is. So, obviously getting to 1 million, that's like the first big thing that is a big milestone. And then some people, they go from maybe it's to 5 million, maybe to 10 million. What do you notice where the biggest, kind of changes in the company's evolution happen in terms of like revenue standpoint? Like,
Yeah. Up to 5 million is typically, principal led sales,
yep.
right? Then at some point, they have to bring in a sales manager. So I get the question a lot too is, well, how many salespeople do I need before I have a sales manager? And how many people are too many for one sales manager? And I think once you have 3 salespeople, you need a sales manager. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a selling sales manager, but that sales manager is going to have a lot of capabilities, to grow and coach and hold people accountable and to hire. Right. And so I think getting past that $5 million level, the owners have to say, I'm willing to invest in the company. And part of the problem is they've been burned in sales and sales management and hired the wrong people, and they lost money, and they might have tried it a couple, 2 or 3 times. And then they just say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too painful.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, find somebody like Olga or myself to help you make a better decision about your next hire. And then when you get to the too many, I'm gonna go to about 12. If a manager has more than 12 people reporting to them, they cannot coach. They cannot really be effective. Even if they're, people that are sort of independent and been around forever, So I think that up to 5 million, to getting past that is tough. Once you get past that, you should be able to get to, 7 to 10, depending on, what you're selling, what kind of products and services you use, what the sales cycle is, what the value is of those. A software company that's got, $100,000 MMR is pretty good, but how do you get to $1 million of MRR?
Yep.
Right. And then when you look at the next level, I think it's, probably 10 to 15.
Okay.
And then when you jump from 10 to 15, you can get to 30 pretty quick, year, 18 months. And then from 30 to 50, right? Because you already have a lot of the support systems that you need. And the more that you sell, the more your margin goes up, because overhead becomes less of a percentage of that sale when you have more sales, right? So, and then from 50 to 80 million is a pretty big jump. So I kind of see those as, where those stages of growth are.
So that's good to hear that. So from the structure perspective, right? So the founder led sales up until about 5 million, and usually before 5, the founders start looking for like a player coach or individual contributor that could grow into whatever the next step is going to be. Once there's like 3 or 4 people, they really need to be managing mostly full time. I mean, ish.
Somebody needs to be managing full time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so at what point do you need to start thinking about, because what drives me nuts is the titles, right? Sometimes it's and I know this could be a completely new episode about it, but people just give titles left and right without any kind of meaning.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, what do you mean you're account manager, but you really were a hunter? Like what? Or like you get a director of sales, but really they were just individual contributor.
Yeah.
Or you have VP of sales, but they only have like, anyway.
Yeah.
So
So titles are for clients to have
yeah,
credibility
yes,
and
but
trust.
also people come with expectations. If I'm VP of
Ego.
sales, my base should be at this, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, anyway, you're not managing anybody really.
Yeah.
So can you set it straight after 30 years? What are the true definitions of individual contributor, sales manager, VP of sales? What am I missing? CRO.
Executive VP.
Right. So like, what do you think is the proper, like, I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, sales is easy.
Sales,
You know, that's people that are responsible for
proper
generating
ladder.
revenue, right? Sales is easy. They're people responsible for generating revenue.
Right.
Sales manager, in order to be a sales manager, you have to have at least one salesperson reporting to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least.
At least one. And you know, I don't care what people titles are, but what's the function is what's important about the organization.
Exactly. So what are
Right?
the functions, kind of like,
Yeah.
how do they line up as the company scales? Because I guarantee you at 5 million and 10 million and 50 million, there's different functions that you need, right? In order to
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to answer that question in a roundabout way.
Go for it.
The smaller organizations that grow, they have people that have multiple functions and they make decisions based on their people, not the business. And so if you take a role, any role in an organization, and you identify what are the top 10 competencies to be effective in that role. In those smaller organizations, you're going to see that one person, key employee, let's call them, they may be responsible for 3 or 4 different positions, right, within the organization. So to grow, you have to separate those positions and put people in the right place that have 80% of that capability, and then they can grow into the rest. And then we have to take those people that were key employees and then not give them responsibilities and, you know, jobs within that should be assigned to somebody else. So again, it's kind of like stretching the crews I was talking about, going from 6 people to 6 people on a crew and then splitting it back to 3. And that's what smaller organizations fail to do. I'll give you a quick example. We just helped an organization with a hiring program. Part of what we do in that is we look at the sales manager skill sets and capabilities, and you know, are they the right sales manager? Do they have what it takes to bring on stronger salespeople? And you know, what are their gaps in their capabilities? Because A players won't work for B managers. Well, so when we reviewed the findings with the client, we were like, you know, I'm not sure that this is the right person for this role. And here's why. And the owner was like, well, yeah, but she's this, yeah, but she's that. And he wanted to kind of justify why he wanted, you know, that person in that role. I said, well, just go meet with her. So he met with her. That afternoon, we got an email back. He said, thank you so much. You just saved me thousands and thousands of dollars. When I met with her and asked her if she really wanted to do this, she said no.
Holy cow. Wow.
So, but she was going to take on the role because she didn't want to, you know, say no. She wanted to support the company. She'd been there a long time. And so part of your answer, the answer to the question you asked, which is how do you know, scale, is really defining what those roles are. And so salespeople, yes, you can have different levels of sales, right? You have, you know, entry level sales, all these 3-letter acronyms, BDRs,
Oh, I know.
AE,
There's something popping up every
strategic, you know, it's like, okay, all that just means something to the company. That means, you know,
right.
and then I think when you get to the manager level, there's really 3 kinds of managers or 3 levels of managers, you know, sales manager, you know, anywhere from 3 to 12 people. Maybe the next level up would be 3 to 12 people, plus they're part of the leadership team, you know, and they're helping make decisions about where the business is going, what they're spending their money on, and how they're going to get a faster growth cycle. And then the next level up, maybe it's, you know, the sales manager that has one manager reporting to them. So, and then from there, it's got to be a VP. And then if you've got more than one VP, it's the executive, senior VP.
Right. And those are all dictated by what is happening underneath them from the bandwidth,
Yeah. I mean, we worked with an organization last year that had 10 managers and 140 salespeople. I mean, that's
a lot.
still a lot, right?
Yeah.
And they only had, one VP. And so what happens with those larger organizations like that is they can't get together often enough. They don't force that, focus on the daily activities. They don't focus on the daily effort that creates the outcomes they're looking for. And then on the other side, a lot of those small organizations, they're too micro focused. You can't micromanage top performers. They don't need it. They won't put up with it. And I'm in agreement with that. And if you got a sales team and everybody's making quota, great. That doesn't mean you don't meet with them. It doesn't mean you don't stay in touch. It doesn't mean you don't still look at the minimum daily activities. It just means you don't have to worry about it as much, And so it depends on the culture of the organization, really,
Right.
Because the fish rises from the head up or it rots from the head down.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me when sometimes when we interview salespeople, they ask, well, what's percentage of salespeople that meet the quota in the company? And it always puzzles me because I'm like, there's so many cans of worms in there, right?
Yeah,
Because
less than 50% is average.
right, but then to me, it's like, well, what is that? Why do you ask that question, and what does that mean to you, right? Because to me, that means very different thing than to somebody else. Like if many salespeople are not meeting quota, that could mean all kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad company or bad product or bad whatever. And so I feel like a lot of times people ask those questions about quota team and all of that. Well, do they even have a sales team that is a sales team?
Well, and who made the quota up?
Right. But what
Was it somebody in finance?
Exactly.
Did they sit down with the salespeople and say, okay, this is what we expect. How does this impact your personal life? And what happens? So here's the challenge, right? Company comes in and says, okay, you got to sell $1 million, and $1 million you make 100 grand. Well, what if that salesperson is fat and happy and comfortable making 75 grand? Then those numbers don't mean anything to them. So if that's the case, then we got to help the salesperson raise their own bar and get some stronger personal goals. So they need to make 120 grand. And then that $1 million quota won't mean anything either because they'll be doing a 1.2 million. And so there's where companies miss a lot about how to manage and motivate and deal with the sales force is managers don't know what motivates the salespeople.
Right. Well, and a lot of times they're focusing, from what I heard from you, is that they're focusing on a lot of external factors without understanding what kind of athlete do we have, right? Yeah. What's going on inside their head, or why are they the way they are?
And salespeople have to have a purpose. If you don't have your own personal purpose and look at the company as the vehicle to help you obtain that, it's not a really good marriage.
So our question for the episode today was, can the same sales team help you grow from 5 to 10 to 15 to 50? How would you answer that question? Kind of
the same salespeople, the same sales team, probably not, because you're going to need to add more salespeople, right? I mean, there will be a max that a salesperson can produce, whatever that might be.
And what do you think that's determined by in terms of what somebody's max is, and how can we tell?
Well, we can answer that by identifying what's somebody's potential for growth. And if you fix these weaknesses and unconscious biases and you build on these strengths, this is what you'll get, and this is how long it's going to take to get there. So, like I shared the example, the sales guy that came in and sold 4 times as much as their top producer. Well, that blew everybody away. I mean, is that realistic? Yeah. A few years back, we helped a trade show organization put a guy in place for the Northeast. And within the first month, he came back with a huge sale from LOB. And they were like, how'd you do that? And he said, I went and made a cold call. And they're like, we've never had a sale this big. We've never had one go this fast. We've never worked with an organization like that. He's like, well, he was just dumb enough to know that he wasn't not supposed to do it. Right. So, but he was a really smart guy and he really did well. But I mean, he stayed for about a year and a half and he outgrew that company. So what is realistic? I don't know. I don't want to put any limits on that. But what's the salesperson's potential? And at some point, you will run into a time wall, and you're not going to be able to sell anymore. So you either have to, sell higher deals, or you have to have more volume. And people a lot of leaders don't really understand that. They're basing it on their experience, right?
Or historical performance. But I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's
So
we
we,
had a,
we, we would like to help them blow through that ceiling of complexity and that glass ceiling of what's possible.
so if for those of you who are watching and you're like, well, how would I know what my salespeople's potential is? I get back with Rocky and maybe he can help you figure out and assess the team, because that is super important. Like, are you having a bunch of, like, what kind of athletes do you have? That's probably the best thing I can tell.
Yeah,
You know,
and if you're happy with the outcomes, then fantastic. Keep doing
oh
what you're
yeah,
doing.
for sure.
Yeah,
But if you're not, then we had a guest last week, Chris Schaum, and he talked about how he transitioned from selling 6-figure deals to 7-figure deals and how he became a pro at that.
yeah,
Well, to me, that's obviously he's an amazing salesperson because he's constantly pushing himself and what his limits are, and he's got his own, practices and all that stuff. But I'm like, can you imagine if you could identify all the gaps in your salespeople and help them grow, how much they would love you in general to change their
yeah,
life. And because you're helping them, because I'm super grateful I had a coach
yeah.
who
So,
helped me. And second of all, like, what will happen to your revenue if they can sell 10 times more
yeah.
deals? Like, I
How
mean,
about just 10% more?
high,
You know,
higher deals.
how much would
I
that
know,
do?
but why do we ignore that every human is unique and they've got their own gaps that we
Yeah,
don't even want to look at? So
yeah. So let me tell you a quick story. And I'm a little older than you are, and for those of you that are a little older out there, this may make sense. I had plantar fasciitis. So I guess as men age a little bit, the foot kind of falls and the tendons stretch and it really hurts. It's like hard to walk. It's sometimes debilitating. So, I went to the doctor, nothing worked. I went to the internet, nothing worked. I talked to other people, nothing worked. I'm at a wedding and I'd been dealing with this for about close to a year. I'm at a wedding and the groom is a physical therapist. And I'm talking to him. I'm like, hey, man, I don't mean to make you work, but I got to ask you, I got plantar fasciitis and it's super painful. What can I do? He said, ice your calves. I'm like, ice my calves? My calves don't hurt. He said, your calves are what's tight that's pulling on your tendons. I iced my calves for 2 nights and I've never had another problem. I can't tell you how
wow.
often what people think is the problem is not the problem. You know, one of the things we hear all the time is, well, we're not generating enough new business, no new logos. Well, then you start looking at, prospecting. Well, we want to do prospecting. Well, you can't just teach prospecting. You have to look at what's preventing the prospecting and what's going on between their ears. So otherwise, I could come in and spend all day talking about prospecting and how to do it and techniques and way to go about it and different thought processes, but nobody will execute it because it's just not their unconscious is not allowing them to do those things. And even if they're forced to do it, they won't be effective at it because they don't believe it. Right. And that's part of it. So we really got to figure out, what's the cause of the problem, like my calves. When you think about negotiation, I hear, company all the time, well, we need negotiation training. Well, negotiation is a symptom of not creating value and not creating urgency. You can't, if you expect to negotiate, then you're going to have negotiation. If you didn't build enough value, if you didn't create that urgency, then people negotiate. I mean, you probably have no interest in calling an ambulance and spending 10 grand to go to the hospital today and sit there and wait for 4 hours because, your foot's sore. But if you had a kidney stone that, got stuck, you would be happy to do that.
Right.
So that all kind of comes back to the salesperson building trust, like real trust, being a trusted advisor, asking the right questions, getting the right people to the table sooner, helping them see the value that you guys have that nobody else has. What are the consequences they're going to face? And so most sales organizations kind of stop short of that. And even, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, everybody had done consultative selling. And everybody says today, well, we did consultative selling. But when you ask the leader or anybody on the team, well, what are the 5 most difficult questions you have to ask the client every meeting? They can't name it. Everybody goes, oh, well, I did medic, and well, we did spin, and we did this other program. But if you ask the team, well, name the steps of the program. Give me an example of how you transition from one step to the
Right.
next in your last sales meeting. They can't do it. So most of the time, training is a waste of money. It's a waste of time. If you want to build equity into your development programs, you really got to start with knowing where you're at, and then you got to be willing to go through a little bit of a storm to get to where you need to be, because change is hard, right? Change is hard for people, and you can't change everything at one day. You got to take small changes and small changes and small changes over a longer period of time.
Right. And change doesn't come easy to most people.
No, we're built to be the way we're supposed to
Right.
be.
Yeah,
I don't.
that was a shock when I found out that not everybody likes change. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we're gonna start wrapping this up because I want to make sure we kind of get through all the things that I had
Okay.
on my list. So what do you think are the most common mistakes that leaders make that hinder growth to the next growth stage? Let's say they're stuck at 10 or they're stuck at 5 for a couple years. So or maybe they're stuck from 15 to whatever the next step.
Yeah.
What are the common mistakes that they make that hinder the growth?
I think hiring the wrong people. When they get to be successful, they're not as willing to take as much risk. I think not focusing sales as the primary center point of your decisions. And, sometimes they just get happy and they're comfortable there. And that's okay, if that's what makes them happy. But, going to the next level takes even more work than it did to start. So, not sure if that answered your question or not.
It did, but now I have another one.
Okay.
So once they decide that they, like they're sick and tired of this level, the CEO, the founder, and you said something earlier about become the next version of that leader who leads that company or whatever company you decided to be. So yeah, I'm like, okay, I want to be the CEO of a $25 million company, but how would they know what that even means? So what's your advice?
Sometimes we need help, right? We need a coach. We need somebody to come in from the outside and give us ideas we hadn't thought about before and hold us accountable to it. So it's like, yeah, from 5 million to 15 million, your systems have to change. Your payroll systems have to change. Your accounting systems have to change. Your shipping has to change. And so you have to start thinking about, okay, if we're going to double in volume and double in sales, then this is what that means. And you have to kind of go through that scenario and identify what's every phase of the business and how does that get impacted. And then once you have that, then you have the plan. I mean, strategies are great, 3-year plans are great, but I think there's a lot of missing gaps when you go, okay, well, we're going to go to 25 million. Okay, well, are your people ready to go to 25 million? How many other people do you need? How many people are not the right people for you to invest in? And maybe they're not happy or they're not going to be happy here. And so when you look at all those different aspects of the business and say, okay, this is how it would look if we double. This is how many employees we need. Because you can double without doubling employees, right? Because that overhead percentage will always go down with more volume.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that and really detailing that out and then visualizing it and believing in it and getting everybody to believe it and then behaving that way that you're there will get you there quicker.
That's the key. And the coach is super important.
Yeah,
Everybody,
and you know, a lot of
only
times,
elite. I mean, watching Olympics. They all have coaches. They're the best of the best, and they have coaches. So
and
why?
you know, the military trains every single day. Those pilots that you know are responsible for protecting our world, they're out there training every single day. When's the last time you talked to one of your clients and said, how did the role play from with the sales manager into the coaching with the team, how'd that role play go? They don't do it.
What role play? What are you
Yeah,
talking about? No.
we don't role play. I hate role playing. Well, I get it, and yeah, we do hate it, but
Oh
you
yeah.
still have to
Oh no.
practice. And if you can practice in a low risk situation, it's a lot easier to do in the real world.
Yeah, for sure. No, role playing is again is one of my favorite things to talk about, because it's super effective. So when people don't have access to kind of the process you talk about, which I recommend them talking to you, because the assessment that you use and the system that you use is incredible.
Thank
But if they don't have access to that, what are some of the signs that you typically want to look for in the sales team that you're like, this person has potential, without putting them through the x-ray? Is there anything that you're like, that's a winner, that could be a winner?
Well, that's hard to do because we're applying our own unconscious biases,
Mhm.
right? So without a third party analysis, looking at an individual that have potential. Well, I guess one of the things I would look at would be, are they coachable? Are they willing to do the hard things I ask them to do no matter what? You know, a lot of them are like, well, I'll do it as long as I don't have to travel. I'll do it as long as I don't have to work late. I'll do it as long as I don't have
Sounds
to do
like a
something,
teenager.
right? Well, that's conditional.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not real. So raise the bar and see who jumps up. See who's willing to do it, no matter what it is. I mean, that was one of the things that I learned very early on with my mentors is I didn't ask any questions. I would say, hey, here's the situation, here's the deal, here's where we're at. What should I do? And they might say, well, call them back and tell them you're taking your proposal back. What? I didn't say what. I said, okay, great, let's do it. Or they would, you know, give me something really difficult to do and I would go do it. No question about it, because I knew they were smarter than me, they had more experience than me, they were making more money than me. And I wanted to be like them. So find somebody who you want to be like, who's doing what you want to do, and do exactly what they do and how they do it without question, and you'll get there faster.
I love it. That the coachable part
Yeah,
is
so they got to be coachable. They got to have commitment. They got to be willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what, as long as it's moral and ethical. Um,
like not selling a vacuum cleaner to a mother with 13 children. I love that.
no carpet.
That story tells me everything about you, because like, like there's, you do the thing, but then you're like, but my moral compass is not
Yeah, I
like
couldn't
that.
do it.
And
Yeah,
so that right there, this story is everything. All
yeah.
right, anything else on that topic before I wrap this up?
I think I'm good. You've asked some fantastic questions, and I am so happy you invited me to be your guest.
Well, I have one more question about,
Oh,
what is
okay.
something that you wish I asked you that is one of your favorite things to talk about that I did not ask?
Wow. I'm going to say being memorable. Salespeople need to be memorable. And they need to find something that makes them memorable. You know, whether it's, you know, part of their personality, part of what they do in sales, how they, you know, come across to people, and how they can marry that with building trust and being the trusted advisor right at the get go. Step one. So I don't know if there's one thing you didn't ask. I love to talk about. I love to talk about sales in general, everything. You know, doesn't matter. Pick a topic. I love it.
Well, as long as I
I
didn't
think it's
miss
the
any.
greatest career anybody could choose.
Yeah, anything, that's actually been the common theme between everybody I brought in. Like, they all actually love it. They
Yeah.
love sales.
And
And
sales is a career default, right? Nobody wakes up in, you know, career day in 11th grade and says, I want to be in sales.
yeah.
we all just wind up here out of, default.
But that's why I love starting with that question I asked you, like, how did you start doing that? And because that story tells you everything also. So, all right. Well, where can people find you?
There's only one Rocky LaGrone out there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Google, any search engine, Rocky at salesdevelopmentexpert.com, 518-378-8456. And yes, I don't mind giving out my number. Happy to talk to you. We're not a fit with everybody, of course, but
yeah,
you grow and you want to grow faster.
Yeah, if you're stuck and you're looking for that next level, Rocky is definitely a good place to start and at least give you some pointers on what you could be doing differently. Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Olga. I greatly appreciate it.
Stay for a minute while I turn this off. Appreciate you guys watching this.
Thank you, everyone. Good selling.
Yeah, good selling. I will be putting some shorts from this video with little nuggets because there are a lot of nuggets from today's video, and so you'll be seeing some more of Rocky in the next couple weeks. Thanks, Rocky. I will see you later.
Thank you. Have a great day. Good selling, everybody.